So you were talking about your apprentice time with, all of these wonderful Zimbabwean artists and painters,
Zimbabwe.
mainly.
Okay, so yeah, there's this program where they'll take in a couple of young artists fresh
Hmm.
out of art school, and
Yeah.
they sort of have you find sort of like direction,
Hmm.
in a way of who you are, what your work is about, and everything.
Hmm.
So I used to paint using oil paints, as I was saying,
Hmm.
and during that time, I couldn't afford using a lot of oil paint in bulk because I loved the, yeah, I had a oil painting craving, I would say. So I needed a medium which could give me, that ability to work in thick layers and still maintain the quality and yeah, and
Hmm.
like the color brightness and everything, the visuals of oil paints.
Yeah.
So I remember the time when my dad and I used to fix. Okay, yeah, funny enough, we used to fix our bathtub at at home,
Yeah.
and we are using silicone, and it sort of had this thick,
Hmm.
yeah, this thickness which still maintained a brushstroke effect, or maybe
Mm.
yeah, like that, yeah, like a brushstroke effect. And I just thought of that medium, and I tried mixing it with other mediums, and yeah, it worked. It sort of gave me the same colors, the same
Hmm.
vibrancy which oil paint sort of gives out. And I started experimenting with it,
Hmm.
until there's a time when I saw that I couldn't, um, yeah, yeah, it couldn't really hold on
Hmm.
to canvas as well as oil paint did. So
Yeah.
I took that as an advantage. Yeah, I
Uh-huh.
took that as an advantage and peeled it off the canvas. And so you'd have a sort of paint on
Hmm.
nothing other than like paint on canvas instead. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So ever since I've been working in silicon.
that's really interesting because I remember the first time I saw your works. I think that a few years ago. I don't remember if it was in Joburg or in Cape Town. It really standed out because of that. It's like painting on nothing. It's like solid paint. Uh, and but there's also something that I'm quite curious to know because it's quite laborious, no? You kind of do
Yes.
these web-like, hair-like kind of, I don't know how to call it, forms, um, which kind of bring back also this sort of labor of handcraft, um, as well as that being done with something that it's completely out of traditional handcraft. But is there anything to do with like the weaving techniques or something that you kind of took from a more sort of traditional way of working, or you kind of had to really create your own way of dealing with this material, basically material slash technique?
Okay. So with silicon, the thing is, it's a type of material which allows you to do a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
You can paint, sculpt,
Mm.
weave, mold, do a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm wondering if you can print using silicon. But anyways,
But maybe,
um,
you have to try
who
next
knows?
step.
Yeah, that might be my next step. But anyways, so the tying of knots
Hmm.
using strings, using silicone in a string form, for me, sort of had a metaphor of tying together or bringing together, relationships or
Hmm.
relations within the society.
Hmm.
Because if you look at the Shona, okay, so I'm Shona. the
Okay.
Shona way of of creating sort of craft in a way. It sort of brings together a lot of designs to make one form. It can be a basket, or it can be a basket, or anything really. So in a way, I just thought of tying that together, tying the knots together to create my own forms. Using knots.
That's interesting, because I just found out that you're Shona. But as I was looking at some of the works, at some of the pieces, it's something that hadn't struck me before, but it did in the context of preparing this talk, this sort of the labor that goes into this weaving, and in a way, although they're very abstract forms, they sort of like relate back to diverse contexts.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to also now kind of talk a little bit about the works that you're showing at ARCO, because I know that there are pieces that you've sort of done within this context of the COVID. So can we kind of go back in time a little bit to, is it something, a direct response to this pandemia status, or it really also ties together, references and experiences from before this period?
Okay, so my work looks at sort of a power balance or imbalance order of things in a way, and looking at the current situation, the COVID-19 Corona era. Last year I happened to visit Venice in Italy. Yes. And it so happens that Italy is one of the worst hit countries in the world at the moment. And so it sort of happened as a coincidence that I happened to be there when there was a high water period, at the highest in ages. And so I sort of took it in a way that going there, the experiences and everything that I sort of experienced in my time during my stay there. I'm sort of reflecting in a way on my stay there, and also, how it sort of affected me in a way, or influenced my work. So the works that I have in ARCO Lisboa are called, let me see if I can show you, because I have them right now.
Okay, that's great. That would be great.
Yeah. Boom. So they're very small.
Is it the veneration of Santura?
No, this is
the
Byzantium.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, you'd find that these works sort of have got I was looking more into a sort of like religious type of way of looking at things after my visit, because I found that Italy is sort of has got a very strong religious connection with like the Christianity way of doing things. And so I was sort of looking at how that can influence me, or how that sort of like influences my being a Shona and also having a Christian background, because in Zimbabwe it's believed to have been a highly Christian nation in a way. Like most of the people say that they're Christian and everything. So that was,
It's kind of cool to. No, it's nice to see them. If you can get like a little bit closer, just because of detail.
The detail. Okay, no problem. Let me just. a bit closer. So this is silicon.
Yeah.
So the vibrancy and different textures and yeah, you know what you can do.
There is a lot of not a lot, but there are. I mean, the kind of obvious also this religious references that you kind
Yes.
of bring, or remembrance, and the idea of how it's kind of an interesting conversation as well. Very often, not with everywhere or with everybody, but the a lot of conversations about contemporary African art, or the artists really rely on art that is very context based, in the sense that it needs to speak of something that it's, you know, that you feel that it's yours or your context as an artist. And I really like the fact that you kind of like just doing these really sort of amorphous, kind of abstract works that speak of too many things, things that are closer to you, things that have to do with your experience, but you kind of like almost like paying homage to, you know, Venice, basically. Which is, no, I think that it's sort of interesting also, the sort of dynamics of knowledge or ownership of, you know, what do you think that you can talk about, and really you can talk about anything.
Oh yeah. That sort of relates to the works, some of the works which I have in the art fair, which are part of the veneration of Saint Tura series.
Yeah.
Where I'm making this fictional character, who, even if you like sort of research or try to find it on Google, I bet you might not find him.
I have to say that I went to and did the Google research on Saint Tura, because I wanted to make sure that I was prepared for whatever. And yes, I didn't really.
Yes.
I didn't really find much of it. So yeah, tell us about this metaphor, this creation.
I mean, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he kept on asking me about people who he knew, who I didn't know personally, you know, or even researched about. And the thing, like the idea that I didn't know them, and there was sort of maybe common knowledge in the art world, or maybe like international art world, sort of had him, you know, like mesmerized, like, Troy, how come you don't know this so and so, or how come you don't know this person? And so I sort of made works which, if he had seen, and I would have told him that, you know, like the title of the work, he could not even relate to them, because I feel knowledge in a way depends on where you come from, or you know, like where you come from really, or the experiences that you've had, or what are your influences. And so most of, you know, like the things which influence my work might not be what influences the mainstream art, you know, artistic way of doing things. So yeah, that's how the series came.
But that's kind of interesting, because it really, I don't know if did you actually write a story of this character, or you kind of just created the name and then you started to work? Because it really, I mean, it intrigues. It intrigues because, you know, it could be some saint or whatever, and really it's a fiction.
Well, there's a sort of truth. Yeah, there's a truth in a fictional world, and so this Saint Tura happens to be me in a way. So it's a nickname, you know. My friends call me Tura in a way of making fun of my name, Troy. because
Yeah.
Troy is not a common name in the Shona or Zimbabwean language, Shona
Yeah.
language, and sort of twisting it, giving it a twist, sort of, yeah, sounds funny, and they called me that.
I think that
So
was this filmmaker that used to say that really I believe in that fiction is the best way to penetrate truth. So how it relates to these fictions might also say very much something about ourselves, the works, and how we relate to these works. Because often, I mean, there's this idea of knowledge. Once I was talking with a friend, a curator from South Africa, that I had just met in the context of an exhibition that I was doing there. And we did this
yeah,
talk, and he started to talk about how he found that his years as a student very often confused him because the references of art history that he had in this university were all European, and that had nothing to do with what it was, his daily experience, his daily life. And it was something to me that kind of stroked me at that moment because I studied partly in Africa and partly in Europe. I kind of understood the context of whatever things that he was mentioning, but it was like, to me this is like words in Chinese. I don't get it. And that sort of idea that he has to know because it's the art, it really kind of also brings about the question of which histories are we talking about and how we relate to history. So as an artist, I mean, you
oh yeah,
have the freedom to really create and recreate and invent your own histories, but also
yes,
to go on, yeah.
okay, yeah, all right, yeah, that also reminds me of a series which yeah, because I work in series,
Yeah.
one series, maybe a few months, and then move on
Mm-hmm.
to the next one. So that series was called Forever Neverland, which sort of was a fictional world. I
Mm-hmm.
think most of the people can relate to Peter Pan's Neverland. This
Mm-hmm.
make-believe world where everything
Yeah.
is all mellow and you've got
Mm.
pixies which can fly and make-believe meals.
Mm.
So I was sort of looking at my world, maybe
Mm-hmm.
the Zimbabwe Harare world in a way, which is really sort of socio political or economic influenced in a way,
Mm-hmm.
where where most people have got make believe meals or make believe
Mm-hmm.
dreams in a way.
Mm.
And I also feel like fiction in a way, sort of eases conversations,
Mm.
I feel. Yeah.
No,
So
for
I
sure.
feel I can relate.
For sure.
Yeah.
Um, Tell me, so you've produced these works now since the lockdown. I mean, you've been working a lot in this period, or that you did that series and that's it. And how is Zimbabwe, by the way, right now? I haven't heard. I've been following most of the African, countries and the neighboring countries, but Zimbabwe, we've been hearing not quite a lot of info. But how are things at the moment with this? Yeah.
So one thing for sure is it's cold,
Okay.
and yeah, it's cold, and we're also under a lockdown situation where, yeah,
Yeah.
thanks to the coronavirus,
Mm-hmm.
so you're sort of restricted to going from
Mm.
places which you would normally go for the
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And there is, yeah, other things also going on in the background,
Mm.
socially,
Mm.
economically, and everything. But I think almost like the whole world were pretty much,
Mm.
yeah, what was surviving. Yeah,
Yeah, we are. Do you feel, because
yeah, but
we're talking about how you did these works, for example, during the curfew, and they don't necessarily, they're not like a literal response to what's happening. And you know, a lot of people are like producing a lot of work now that really deals directly with this period, whereas you know, not everybody really is in that creative mood. I'm not. I've been working a lot, but I'm not. I don't feel like I can now reflect on the times that we are living simultaneously. So do you feel like, are you working on a new series or something that really addresses this period currently, or it, yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to?
Okay, so I personally feel that as an artist, I should take time to reflect and absorb situations as they happen and come along. And then if it affects me in some way, then I can speak about that in a way. Because I feel, because I feel like every single thing, or you know, it might be an experience, or maybe like what you've just ate. You might not really be able to comment on that, like just as soon as you finished eating it, but then you can maybe reflect on it maybe a couple of months or years later. And so personally, I've still been making work, which has been influenced by the lockdown, maybe like on the size part, because I'm starting to make smaller works. I've had to shift from using a bigger space into a very small, limited space. So size wise, my work has grown small, but smaller rather, because I'm used to working
big scale,
and big scale. But then also because my work is socio-political in a way, so I'm still looking at how we still relate as human beings, or as friends, or as pals. Now where everyone is sort of having to wear a mask just as soon as you leave the house, you know, that also affects me in a way. But I've maybe in a few months or so, with my work, will have that direct impact.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if there are any questions here. I think that there's a lot of people around, but they're just waving. So we'll just carry on. We'll just carry on a little bit more. We were talking about, you were talking about scale, and going back to, you know, the method and so on. Because the first pieces that I saw from you were quite small, and then suddenly, you know, they really grew into size. But do you ever also combine other materials and sort of thinking? Because there is a long tradition of painting in Zimbabwe from which you kind of managed brilliantly depart from and to, you know, create something of your own. But there's also this thing of working with available materials. So are you kind of like starting to combine things, or you still really pushing the limits of the silicon only?
Okay, so there's a time when okay, I won't disclose the name, but someone a collector saw my work in an art fair, and they made a comment on how my work could not have come from Zimbabwe because the medium itself maybe is not associated with anything from Zimbabwe, or it's sort of like a foreign medium, and you know, people expect you to work in a certain way, right? And for me personally, I feel like as if silicone makes me tick or makes me want to create more, or if I've got a craving for that, then I should not be limited with the material which I use. So that also goes back to cultural knowledge, you know, like what you know versus what I know.
Yeah.
And I feel using silicone in a way sort of talks to I'm young, you know, so I should also use something which is vibrant and which I can relate more to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I sometimes I sometimes use my work with resin, clear resin, and also fiberglass, but these are sort of my own personal works which I really haven't shown yet, and eventually, like at some point, I will. But there's a time when I made more sculptural works which were fused with fiberglass, called Cloaking the Obvious. Maybe I can show. Right? Yeah, maybe I can show you. Let me
try.
Let me see if I can show you. Yeah, yeah. Boom, boom, boom. So it's a bit dark and messy in here.
Oh, don't worry. Don't worry. It's a studio. Yeah.
So yeah, this is the work.
And, oh, so that's freestanding, no?
Yeah, so it's freestanding. And it's fused with a fiberglass. It's got a fiberglass stand in it. So you, yeah, it's, and so that's the work. But anyways, I'm still thinking of ways of creating more, sort of, or still finding more vibrant and more appealing materials to me personally, because as an artist, it has to make sense to me first before it does to the world. So yeah.
No, of course, of course. And you mentioned something really interesting, that is the fact that somebody saying that your work couldn't have come from Zimbabwe. I mean, why is that? Is because of these stereotypes or that people have as to what artists from Africa do or should do. And one of the things of at least this curatorial section that we're doing at the art fair, that is in its second year, it's also to really bring a non-stereotype approach to the contemporary creation that is happening now. That's why, you know, focusing on emergent young artists that are really just doing, you know, what they want to do, because anything can relate to you. There's no such a thing as the Zimbabwean art or the Zimbabwe. Yeah. And yes, I kind of just wanted you to comment a little bit on these issues of, you know, interpretation, how we perceive the others, how in a way, you know, works like this are also like breaking boundaries. You know, I can see also this coming from a tradition of a little bit, you know, Elena Tsui does something different, but there is a visual relation, but, you know, it's other materials, it's other things, but that kind of, that really, the younger creation, people are really just focusing on issues that are close to them and that matter, instead of, you know, and breaking those stereotypes of what art from the continent or art from Zimbabwe has to be or look like. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because, you know, as an artist, you, as I said earlier on, you are influenced by events or things which happen around you. So you sort of have to reflect in a way of maybe if let's say I love food, but if let's say you so let's say you've eaten maybe like eggs for breakfast, and you sort of like having eggs pretty much like in every breakfast that you have, then you can also like show that, because it's not really something which you know, like where you have to always come up with these big words and everything. Like that's just how I personally take it. Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Great. I think that we're pretty much there. Troy, thank you so
Yeah.
much for your time, for showing these beautiful works with the limitations of Instagram Live, but I think that it was really, really interesting. Happy birthday. I know that it's your birthday, so I hope that you manage to commemorate within, you know, whatever situation it is. We're also under curfew, but yeah, but 6, 7 p.m. there's no one in the streets as well. And yeah,
Yeah.
I'm you know, looking forward to see more of your work in the future.
All right. Thank you, Paula.
Yeah, you're
And thank you
welcome.
everyone for tuning in. Yep.
Yeah. Bye bye,
All
everybody.
right. Ciao.
Ciao.